Hello, my name is Tess Cornwall, and I recently completed my Master of Science in Digital Archaeology at the University of York. My work sits at the intersection of archaeology and technology, exploring how immersive tools such as 3D modeling and real-time game engines can help us understand and communicate the past in new ways. Alongside my academic work, I have experience in photography, filmmaking, and digital storytelling, all of which informed my approach to archaeological interpretation. This presentation focuses on my dissertation project, the creation of an interactive digital reconstruction of 10th century Coppergate in York, and explores how digital environments like this can bring archaeology to life, challenge stereotypes, and enhance public engagement. Coppergate is one of the most significant Viking Age archaeological sites in the United Kingdom. The excavations were carried out between 1976 and 1981, which uncovered exceptionally well-preserved evidence of urban life in 10th century York, including timber buildings, artefacts, and environmental remains. Despite this rich archaeological record, the public's understanding of the Viking period remains dominated by popular images of raiders and warriors. Everyday activities such as craft production, trade, and domestic life are often overlooked in favor of more dramatic narratives. At the same time, traditional heritage interpretations still rely heavily on static displays, site plans, or museum exhibits. While these are valuable, they struggle to convey the lived experience of the past, including the sensory, spatial, and human elements that define daily life. My project aimed to address this by utilizing digital technologies to reconstruct Coppergate as a lived environment. This aim was not only to visualize archaeological data, but also to reimagine the site as a place where people cooked, worked, trade, and lived, allowing us to experience the Viking Age world in a more immersive and human-centered way. The central aim of this project was to explore how immersive digital reconstructions can be used to communicate aspects of Viking Age civilian life and challenge long-held stereotypes of the period. To achieve this, I focused on three main objectives. First, to reconstruct a portion of 10th century Coppergate as an exploratory 3D environment based on excavation data, GIS information, and archaeological publications. Second, to critically examine the interpretive decisions required when transforming static archaeological evidence into a dynamic, lived-in digital space. And third, to evaluate how such reconstructions can support public engagement with the past, complement physical heritage sites, and offer new ways to tell archaeological stories. Ultimately, this project asked how digital heritage tools can bridge the gap between excavation data and human experiences, and what that means for how we present and understand the Viking world. The foundation of this project was built on a range of archaeological data and published research from excavations at 16 to 22 Coppergate. These excavations revealed exceptionally well-preserved layers of Viking Age occupation, including building footprints, artifacts, and environmental evidence. I drew heavily on excavation reports produced by York Archaeological Trust, which provided detailed plans of structures, stratigraphic information, and artifact distributions. These were essential for reconstructing the layers of the settlement and understanding how space was organized and used. In addition to excavation data, I incorporated artifact catalogs, typological study, and specialized analysis to inform decisions about material, architecture, and domestic activities. GIS datasets were also particularly valuable as they helped to map spatial relationships and reconstruct the street plan and overall environment. Historical sources and comparative archaeological evidence from other Viking Age sites across Scandinavia and the British Isles were used to fill interpretive gaps, especially where direct evidence from Coppergate was incomplete or absent. This combination of dataset ensured that the reconstruction remained grounded in evidence while also allowing for careful and informed interpretation where necessary. The reconstruction process combined archaeological research with a range of digital tools to translate data into an immersive, explorable environment. All house models were created in Blender, which provided the flexibility to buy assets based on archaeological plans and artifact evidence. This included everything from building structures and domestic interiors to individual artifacts such as a Viking comb. The reconstructed environment was then assembled and visualized in Unreal Engine 5.6, a real-time game engine that allowed me to create a fully explorable living museum space. Unreal provided the tools to experiment with lighting, materials, sound, and environmental storytelling, all of which helped me to convey a sense of place and atmosphere. GIS data and site maps were imported and used as spatial references during the building process, ensuring that the placement of structures reflected the archaeological record as closely as possible. Throughout the project, I maintained an iterative workflow which involved reviewing archaeological evidence, modeling assets, placing them within the virtual space, and then evaluating their accuracy and interpretive value. This back and forth approach was crucial in striking a balance between historical fidelity and narrative clarity. One of the most important aspects of this project was the creation of custom 3D models to represent key elements of the Coppergate site. These were designed from the ground up in Blender using archaeological drawings, measurements, and artifact catalogs as reference materials. Early in the project, I recreated a Viking comb based on artifacts recovered from the site. This served as a test to refine my modeling workflow and ensure I could capture archaeological detail at an appropriate level of accuracy. I then modeled several Coppergate-style houses, incorporating construction features identified during excavations such as the wattle and dab walls, timber planks, and turf or thatched roofing. These buildings became the core structures around which the environment was built. While the main architectural features and key artifacts were modelled from scratch, I also integrated a section of high quality, royalty free, or purchase assets for small items such as pottery, baskets, and barrels. This approach enabled me to save time on less significant details while focusing my efforts on elements that were archaeologically distinct or of interpretive importance. Every model, whether custom made or adapted, was documented with references to the evidence used, ensuring transparency and reproducibility in the reconstruction process. One of the most rewarding parts of this project was transforming static archaeological data into a lived environment. This process involved much more than simply recreating buildings. It was about interpreting how people moved through these spaces, how they used them, and how their daily lives were shaped by their surroundings. Starting with building footprints and artifact distributions, I reconstructed domestic interior streets and activity areas. Choices about materials, construction methods, and spatial organizations were informed by excavation data and supported by comparative research from other Viking sites. Where evidence was incomplete, I made interpretive decisions based on historical and archaeological knowledge. For example, furnishings and household objects were added to suggest domestic activities such as cooking, weaving, and woodworking. These interpretive elements were also clearly distinguished from evidence-based features, ensuring that the reconstruction remained transparent about where imagination filled the gaps. I also paid careful attention to atmosphere and sensory experience. Lighting, spatial arrangement, and environmental details were used to evoke the feeling of bustling settlement, a place where people lived, worked, and interacted, rather than a sterile archaeological plan. The result is a space that feels inhabited and human, inviting audiences to engage with the past in a more meaningful way. The result of this work is what I call the Coppergate Digital Living Museum, an interactive reconstruction of a 10th century neighbourhood designed to communicate the rhythms of everyday life. Unlike static displays or digital models that are purely visual, this environment is meant to be experienced. Users can explore the reconstructed street, move through domestic spaces, and encounter traces of past activity embedded within the environment. The focus throughout was on civilian life. Rather than highlighting military activity or large-scale political events, the reconstruction emphasizes the ordinary, the homes people built, the tools they used, the trades they practiced, and the spaces where social life unfolded. This approach not only challenges stereotypes of Viking culture, but also demonstrates how digital heritage can complement traditional methods of interpretation by creating a space that is both explorable and immersive. The Digital Living Museum encourages deeper engagement with archaeological evidence, allowing audiences to imagine the lived realities behind the material record. The aim is not to replace physical heritage sites or museums, but to support and enhance them, providing new opportunities for education, research, and public engagement. As with any digital heritage project, several challenges and limitations needed to be navigated. One of the most significant issues was the lack of complete evidence. Archaeological data is often fragmentary, and while excavation records provide a strong foundation, many aspects of past lives leave no trace. Deciding how to represent these gaps require careful consideration and transparent interpretive choices. Balancing accuracy with storytelling was another challenge. The project needed to remain faithful to the archaeological record while still creating an environment that felt coherent and engaging. This often meant making compromises between strict evidence based modelling and the inclusion of plausible but speculative elements to complete the picture. Time constraints also influence the project's scope. Due to the limitations of the dissertation timeframe, certain elements such as more detailed artifact modelling or extended areas of the settlement had to be prioritised or simplified. Finally, although the reconstruction was evaluated through expert feedback, no formal user testing was conducted. This means that the effectiveness of the Digital Living Museum as a tool for communication and engagement remains to be tested with broader audiences. Despite these limitations, the project provides a valuable foundation for future research and development. Evaluating the effectiveness of the Coppergate Digital Living Museum was an important part of this project. Because there was no time for formal user testing within the scope of the dissertation, the evaluation instead focused on expert feedback and critical self-reflection. I interviewed with Heritage 360, a digital heritage consultancy, to gather professional insight into the project's strengths and areas for development. Their feedback highlighted the strong integration of archaeological evidence into the reconstructed environment and praised the project's focus on everyday life rather than more traditional narratives. They also emphasized the effectiveness of the environment's visual design and the potential for it to engage a wider audience. However, the feedback also identified areas where the project could be further improved. In particular, Heritage 360 recommended formal user testing to understand better how different audiences might interact with and interpret the reconstruction. They also suggested expanding the level of environmental detail, such as texture variation and sound design, to enhance immersion further. Alongside this external evaluation, I engaged in continuous self-reflection throughout the project, assessing how my interpretive decisions shape the outcome and what that means for the communication of the past. This reflective process was crucial in understanding the work's strengths and limitations, as well as identifying opportunities for further improvement. This project demonstrated the potential of immersive digital reconstructions to transform how we present and understand the past. One of the key outcomes was the way it challenged the domestic image of Vikings as warriors and raiders by shifting the focus towards domestic, economic, and social life. By doing so, it provided a more balanced and nuanced picture of Viking Age society. The reconstruction also proved that archaeological data can be more than static information on a page. When combined with digital technology, it becomes a dynamic, explorable environment that can communicate complex ideas and stories in a way that is accessible to a wide audience. Another important outcome was the demonstration of how digital heritage projects can complement physical sites and museum displays. The Digital Living Museum does not replace traditional interpretations, instead, it enhances it by offering an additional layer of context and interactivity. It can help visitors engage with archaeological evidence on a deeper level and encourage them to think critically about how we reconstruct and interpret the past. Ultimately, this project established a clear and repeatable workflow for integrating excavation data, GIS mapping, and 3D modeling into a cohesive digital reconstruction. This methodology can be applied to other sites and periods, highlighting the broader relevance of this approach to archaeological research and public engagement. In conclusion, this project has shown that immersive digital reconstructions are powerful tools for exploring and communicating the past. By transforming archaeological data into a lived environment, they allow us to move beyond static displays and invite audiences into the spaces where history happened. The Coppergate Digital Living Museum illustrates how digital heritage can shift our perspective from large-scale historical events to the small, everyday details that define people's lives. This focus on domestic life provides a richer and more human understanding of the Viking world. At the same time, the project has demonstrated the importance of striking a balance between evidence and interpretation. While creativity and imagination are essential for filling the gaps in the archaeological record, they must always be grounded in research and presented transparently. Most importantly, this work has highlighted the potential for digital reconstructions to complement traditional archaeological interpretations. They are not replacements for excavation reports or museum exhibits, but powerful tools that can bring those materials to life. While this project achieved its primary objectives, it also presented several exciting opportunities for future development. One of the most important next steps would be to conduct formal user testing. This would provide valuable data on how different audiences, from the general public to students and heritage professionals, engage with the Digital Living Museum and how effectively it communicates archaeological information. Expanding the reconstruction is another key area for future work, including a larger selection of Coppergate, adding more detailed artifact assemblages, or incorporating seasonal changes and daily rhythms could create a richer and more dynamic environment. There's also significant potential to integrate additional layers of interpretation, such as audio, navigation, interactive information points, or augmented reality elements. These features could enhance accessibility and offer new ways for users to explore and understand the past. With further development, the Coppergate Digital Living Museum could become not only an educational resource, but also a powerful research tool in its own right. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to my presentation. Working on this project has been a deeply rewarding experience, not only because it brought together my interest in archaeology, technology, and storytelling, but also because it demonstrated the potential of digital heritage to transform how we think about and engage with the past. This work highlights the value of using immersive technologies to humanize the archaeological record and spark curiosity about everyday life in the Viking Age. If you'd like to learn more about the project or discuss potential collaborations, I'll be more than happy to connect and continue the conversation. My email and LinkedIn are on the screen. Thank you once again.